Greetings and welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the relationship between the beauty and the beast in April. The beauty is Venus, the beast is Saturn. Venus is the lesser benefic, the planet of fortune, whereas Saturn, the beast, is the greater malefic. They're very closely tethered together for the whole of the month. When I did my forecast for April for each of the 12 zodiac signs, I did say that this month could be challenging. What we have is Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces, but it is in retrograde through to the 13th. It meets Saturn in an exact conjunction on the 7th, whereas Saturn really doesn't like being in the sign of Pisces. What we also get with Saturn, it's the end of its 29.5-year journey through the heavens. So it's the end of a cycle. If you like, it's the sector of culmination. But the sign of Pisces is not just about the physical world, it's also about the spiritual, healing and psychological dimension too. Saturn can be very cold, restrictive and limiting. It can, of course, give us rewards when we've rolled up our sleeves, we've applied ourselves in a very industrious way, shown the perspiration to match our inspiration, and we can get positive rewards. So for some people, if you've really painstakingly dedicated yourself to something over a long period of time, the next month could see a breakthrough. But for many of us, not least because of the imposition of the tariffs, we are going to see a shift in the global landscape around everyday money. And Venus influences everyday money, Saturn influences business, but most of all power, where power is applied. And especially when power is applied in a very top-down authoritative way. So the beauty and the beast, that's the story of April. If you've yet to check out your April deep dive forecast for each of the 12 signs, please see my forecast below. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. I'm going to unpack all of this for you. I'm going to share the event chart for the exact conjunction of the 7th of April between Venus and Saturn. Venus retrograde at that time goes direct on the 13th. On the 25th, Venus is in forwards motion, but Saturn in attendance once more. In fact, by the end of the month, they go from just slightly beyond 3 degrees apart at the start of the month to just under 3 degrees apart. So they're very tensely aligned for the whole of April. The implications of this are enormous, to be honest. How will these tariffs play out? I'm going to explore that, but we also need to be conscious that Venus doesn't just rule the sign of Taurus, which is about foundations, stability, about our values, our self-worth, what we stand for, and money. It also rules the sign of Libra, very much about how we relate, how we keep things on an even keel. It can be about graciousness, it can be about our interactions, but it can also be to do with how things appear, so the more presentational aspects. So in other words, Venus can be about diplomacy. So what we're seeing as this month begins is the harsh energy of Saturn is being applied in a very assertive way to the more sensitive vibe of Venus. How will this play out? By sharing the event charts, we get the wider context of what's going on. And I feel that that will help us all to understand how we can navigate this tense month. I'm then going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you an exact flavour of what you can expect. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any thoughts, please do share them. If you're a returning visitor, all your views and interactions are truly appreciated. Please check out my free natal birth chart. It's absolutely brilliant. I honestly believe it's the best you will find. You can download it underneath this video. You can also sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. What I also provide now, this is new, is an overview, the astrological overview of each day, as well as your personal forecast. This gives you a perspective of what to expect each of those days. Please see below to sign up for that too. You can also sign up for your free daily natal moon horoscope as well. Again, see below for that. I'm a consultant astrologer. If you'd like to work with me one-to-one, please read my testimonials below, see what other people have found, or take advantage of my new astrology reading service. It's proving very popular. You get to see how I work on screen, but you're just not present. But it is less expensive than a one-to-one. Please see below for more about that too. So Venus and Saturn are within 3 degrees for the whole of April. That relationship begins with Venus at 27:31. It ends the month at 29:36. Saturn, meanwhile, starts the month at 24:29 and ends it at 27:44. So they actually get closer together as the month goes on. Now Venus, of course, starts this month in retrograde, but it is exalted in Pisces, so it does have gifts here. Saturn, on the other hand, is not happy in the sign of Pisces. This is the end of a journey which began in 1996 when Saturn moved into the sign of Aries, which of course is going to be repeated this year on the 26th of May. Saturn rules time, but it's also about karma. It can be about outcomes, and therefore it can have very serious implications. So in a way, what's being manifested now is something that has been in the works for a very long time. Now we need to be mindful of the archetypes of both planets. Venus rules 2 zodiac signs. Venus through the sign of Taurus is very much about sensuality. It's earthy, a great appreciation of the arts, of nice clothes and fashion, but also great food and wine. But Venus is also about our sense of self-worth, our values, and also everyday money, and that's critical. But its rulership of the sign of Libra, Venus, is very much more to do with the presentational side of things. It can be about image, it can be about our relationships, it can also, of course, be about harmony. Now, the energy of Venus can be manifested in the sign of Pisces, where she's exalted, through both the roots of Taurus and also of Libra. Saturn is the sole domiciliary ruler of the worldly sign of Capricorn, which is very much to do with authority, the old world order, but it can also be to do with cold, oppressive energy. Now, its co-rulership of the sign of Aquarius is much more complex. That's the sign that has a duality. Here Saturn appreciates the experience of Saturn, the knowledge, the wisdom, but also is open to progression through the co-regent of Uranus. But Saturn in Pisces, coming to the end of that 29.5-year cycle, is not a great fit because Pisces resists boundaries, it resists structures, and those are the very things that Saturn likes. So what we can see here with Saturn in Pisces is the coldness doesn't really understand the more empathetic, mutable and feeling and psychological energies of the sign of Pisces. So sometimes Pisces energy is not necessarily what we see, but it can be what we sense. So as we begin this month, what Saturn's saying to Venus is, what is the value of those relationships? What is your approach to your everyday money? And those two strands are going to be threaded through this month. When I did my deep dives for each of the zodiac signs for April, I visited this subject in detail. If you've yet to watch your April forecast, please see the link below for more. But they start this month in terms of Venus and Saturn just slightly 1 minute beyond 3 degrees apart, but they end the month within 3 degrees, nearer to 2. And of course Venus is retrograde as we begin this month. Now she does go forwards on the 13th, but on the 7th of the month Venus and Saturn forge an exact conjunction, and on that day the retreating Mercury, it will go direct later that day, is also in the mix. In fact, all through the second week of April, Saturn is pummeling not just Venus but also Mercury, despite it going direct, but critically the North Node too. Saturn applies to the North Node on the 14th of the month. This is historic because the North Node is back in Pisces for the first time since 2012, but it's very much about our collective fate. Because the sign of Pisces is about culmination, we've been building up to this moment for 29.5 years. And Saturn, of course, is much more to do with the physical domain, but Pisces isn't so much to do with the physical domain. So we have a mismatch. But Saturn rules time. In Greek mythology, Saturn was Chronos, chronology. In Roman mythology, of course, that's what we relate to through Western tropical astrology. So Saturn is very scrutinizing. It can be limiting. It can be very exacting. It wants to know exactly where things are. The sign of Pisces is much more ephemeral. So one of the things we saw with that very tricky lunar eclipse of the 14th of February, going between the signs of Virgo and Pisces, we saw Saturn right by the Sun. And what we've seen since then is a lot of announcements, cutting back on social benefits, reducing healthcare, anything to do with the fabric of support is being dismantled. That's the cold logic of Saturn. But of course also, because Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces, Pisces can be about philosophies. And those Saturnian energies are also manifesting certain people's philosophies. People who believe that people should rely totally on themselves. But that's fine if you've got absolutely loads of money, because if they didn't have that privileged position, I can assure them they wouldn't have the same world view. So in other words, there's a disconnect because of their power towards the reality of our everyday existences. But particularly we are seeing a hit on compassion, a hit on care, a hit on people's right to freely say what they want. So some of these characters may be talking up democracy, but they're not actually seeing it being acted out in reality. So what we're seeing, particularly with Neptune now in the sign of Aries, passion through the fire sign of Aries, emotion is being vented through the air energy of Pluto, which is very much about the collective, and Pluto's about power. So Turkey, repression of the media, huge marches. Serbia, we have huge marches. Big outpouring of frustration in Spain about tourism. We have in Germany a big outpouring of frustration about immigration. We have in France a pushback against Marine Le Pen, but we're going to see a lot of anger ventilated by the right. We're also seeing in Romania the American government getting involved in criticising the Romanians for not allowing the presidential voting to go forwards, but JD Vance has been found out because 27,000 TikTok accounts were active voting for the candidate, and all of them have been found to be from Russia. And that's the type of thing that Europe has been dealing with for a very long time. So we do have a big pouring out of frustration and energy. And on April the 5th, we have the Hands Off March happening all across the United States. People are finding their collective voices, which is so important. So that's Saturnian energy, which is about authority, cold authority, can be bullying, can be repressive, is trying to shut down the more emotional energies of Venus, which is about how we relate. And it's also being done through the guise of finance, which Venus, of course, rules. So the tariffs that have been imposed have been rushed, in my humble opinion. And part of the reason they've been rushed is because of political expediency. And in a way, that's where Uranus speaks to this situation, because Uranus in Taurus is very much about trying to tear up pre-existing financial systems, in some ways in a positive manner, particularly through digital currencies. But we've also seen a huge amount of instability come from the so-called tariffs that have been announced. But you know, they're not like for like. They're not tariffs at all. What they are is an analysis of the differential between the trading accounts between two different countries. So if some countries are selling more than their gross domestic product than the United States is to them, the equation is based on that, not tariffs. So we have the tiny Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic who sell fish to America have been whacked with a tariff, but their imports of American goods are tiny because it is essentially a small village in an outcrop in the sea, and that's how bluntly this has been applied. So there are some things that President Trump has issues with which I think are justified. So China has never taken part in the global exchange rate mechanism, which has always given them a very unfair advantage. Also, there's lots of goods pouring in each year to Britain and America and Europe that are made in places where the cost of labour and the conditions of the labour force are obviously much cheaper than they are in the United States or Europe. But we've got to remember that a lot of American and European countries have moved their manufacturing to the very places that these tariffs are being applied to. And that's because the cost base was lower. And I never thought, for example, here in the UK, when Marks and Spencer's moved their jean production from West Wales to wherever, Vietnam, Cambodia, China, it may have been cheaper, but it wasn't actually good for the brand long term, because sometimes it's better to have an investment in the workforce in a way which is truly meaningful. And that's challenging in a global economy, but some of the reasons that the American manufacturing base has eroded is because of American manufacturers choosing to move the production. Also, if we do put tariffs on things, particularly in the automotive sector, a lot of the components will be from the global supply chain. So it's very, very complex indeed. And although the aims of it may be laudable, trying to force it overnight is unlikely to be very successful. This is the type of stuff that's extremely complex. But it is true that in his first term, remember, Venus is money, Saturn authority, cold logic, he did impose some sanctions and tariffs against China. They moved some of their manufacturing to Cambodia and Vietnam to avoid that. So obviously that's who they're going after now. So you can see there is some merit in it. It's just the calculation, the formula that's been used is so clumsy and isn't based on reciprocal tariffs at all. But we know the first one, which has just been manifestly or just randomly opposed to everybody as a minimum of 10%, including the tiny community of the Falkland Islands, that was April the 5th. Then we got the higher reciprocal tariffs going in on the 9th of April. But guess what? China are now saying they won't agree to the sale of TikTok to an American company. That's not going to prove very popular in America. Also, if we do get manufacturing in terms of automotive back to America, who do you think will be doing the jobs? Do you think it will be local people, or do you think it will be robotics? I ask you that question. So it looks laudable, some of it may have merit, But like anything like this, it needs to be implemented in a very cautious way, because once you upset the financial markets, we see the value of equities being absolutely wiped out, which will affect everybody's pensions, because those local states that people have worked for in public service, they will all have equities in all the blue chip companies that are in those indices. So that's going to hit people's incomes. We're also going to see the people who might like to buy those cheap Chinese, Vietnamese and Cambodian goods not being able to afford the new prices because inflation will go up. Also, the dollar has diminished in its value, which is really risky when we're seeing the BRICS set of countries getting stronger, and their main aim is to knock the dollar off its perch as being the main currency of the world. So if we're playing with that, we need to be very careful. And also we're seeing alliances being formed. Who would have thought that China, Japan and South Korea, all natural enemies, have got together and are collaborating because of this situation. So we also have to be conscious that when these sanctions or tariffs are applied, they are in some ways being used quite bluntly towards so-called allies. Venus is about relationships. So if we're cold and ruthless towards relationships, we're destroying relationships, and we're pushing people towards forging new ways of interacting. So what's happened over Ukraine, for example, because of his antipathy, which is totally personal, antipathy to Ukraine and sycophancy to Russia, what we're seeing is Europe has actually become stronger, which isn't actually so much of a good thing. But what I would say, coming from a business background myself, there's nothing wrong with trying to understand where there's too much dependency, where illegal drugs are flooding the streets, where illegal immigration is unchecked. That's not good for the fabric of society, where criminality is thriving unchecked. All of these things, I think many of us would totally agree, do need careful managing, and there needs to be much greater supervision and much greater range of policies in order to make things safer and fairer. But doing it overnight is a rushed way of doing things, and in a way it's very anti-Saturnian. So that's where the more emotional energies of the president might be coming out, and he has got his ascendant on the last degree of the sign of Leo, which is right by a fixed star called Regulus, but he also has his Mars in the 12th house, which can be a very insecure position for Mars. It's in the proud Leo, a lot of ego, but in the 12th house that can create a lot of, let's say, instability in people's emotions. But both those positions currently are in a quincunx with Neptune on the 8th house of his natal chart. 8th house is shared finance, investments, pensions, shares, legacies. Neptune is confusion. Saturn's going there 26th of May, but it will hit as we go deeper into May in a quincunx with both his Mars and also his ascendant. The first house is where we want to act out our individual desires. Can be about our ego. The 8th house is where we have to connect with others, whether we want to or not. So there's a lack of integration between the ideas and what the potential outcome may be. And of course, the moving Uranus in the sky in his 10th house, his Uranus is natally in his 10th house in Gemini, but the moving Uranus in Taurus is also T-squaring that ascendant and also that Mars as it approaches its journey into the sign of Gemini for 4 months from the 7th of July. So we are going to see a big pushback from people who work in finance. I understand that there was a big sell-off of Truth Social shares before this announcement was made. That is something to be rather concerned about, because value Values is something we should all hold dear, and values seem to be getting eroded in the world that we're living in. So I feel that what April is doing is, in a way, shining a light on what the implications are of being very ruthless around relationships, but also about benefits, social fabric, but also about people's personal finance too. So I'm going to share with you the event chart for the 7th, but I'm also going to share with you the event chart for the 25th of April, because they're back into a conjunction, but on that day Venus is no longer retrograde, because on the 13th it goes direct. But on the 13th too, we also have a very potentially turbulent full moon in the sign of balance and equilibrium of Libra. So relationships, and we have Mars in its full in Cancer, very over emotional, in the second phase of its journey through Cancer, which began last September the 4th, but since the 6th of January retrograde, it did go direct from the 24th of Feb. It's going to go back into Aries on the 18th of April, but that Mars position is T-squaring the position of the Sun and also the position of the Moon, and therefore that can create a lot of instability. And in fact, Mars is going to be clashing with the Sun moving into Taurus, and also with Pluto as we head into the latter parts of this month. So I feel that April overwhelmingly is a very potentially stormy month. Somebody wrote on a video, my April videos last night, why are you being so negative about finances? No one else is. Everyone else says it's positive. Well, it does make me smile, to be honest, that people tell me what everyone else is saying. You know, you can be an astrological tourist and look at lots of different people's viewpoints. That's fine. But, you know, we have to be realistic that Mars is the primary influence of this month, definitely in a potentially disruptive way. But we can see also that the conjunction between Saturn and Venus is a massive part of it too. So, if you're in a relationship that has been bumping along the bottom, and one of the areas that you find difficult to agree on is everyday finances, that's going to be challenging. If, however, you're somebody who finds it hard in terms of your relationship to share intimacy, that could be an issue, because the sensuality of the sign of Taurus is very much about that physical closeness. If you are somebody who's very, very keen to lose weight, but you're not really enjoying it, that diet could be tested with Venus and Saturn in a conjunction. If you're someone who has got body image issues, because Venus through Libra, very much about presentation and appearance, you could feel very conscious of that this month. But equally, if you're someone who does want to get more active and you're in the Northern Hemisphere, this month could be a push. If you're trying to squeeze on your costume and trunks from last year and not finding it so easy, you could find the spark to start that diet. But there is no doubt about it that Venus is about finance, and because of the cost of borrowing has been so historically low since the recession of 2008, what's happened, there's been a big stretch out in terms of what people have paid for rentals and also for mortgages. Now, it's possible with all the turbulence and the devaluation of the dollar that interest rates may be slashed to stimulate growth and to ward off recession, but it's a risky strategy, because essentially you're going back to quantitative easing and printing money to speed up the economy. So it's a short-term fix. It's not really a structural thing. And remember, Saturn is about structure. So on the screen now, the big takeout is the ascendant is in the feeling sign of Cancer. But isn't it ironic that Mars is just tucked up in that potentially rather up and down 12th house? Mars in full in Cancer. It's a cardinal sign for sure. It's very much about authority, but our decision making can be coloured by our emotions, and because Mars can be very impatient, we could make quick decisions which aren't necessarily for our greater good. Now the ironic thing is, although Saturn is munching Venus, as you can see at 2515, and in the 9th house of trade, international affairs, export and import, you couldn't make it up really. Now this is based on Greenwich and the prime meridian and universal time, but I feel that that works collectively for everybody in the world. But that suggests we are going to see a lot of arguments and tension and disagreements and unnecessary unpleasantness between different countries. We've seen that with the utterances over Greenland. You can't just go and snaffle a country because you feel like it. You feel that if you could pay the population or some money, that they're all going to keel over to what you want, when America already has unlimited military access to that island. So of course it's all about the minerals, and of course Ukraine is all about the minerals. It's about the coal, it's about the lumber, and that's what the invasion was always about, and of course a petty personal grudge. So that collective in the 9th house may be supported in a way by the ascendant and Mars, but I think we need to be conscious of Mars in the 12th house. Mars in the 12th house sees stuff come into the open in very unexpected ways. But look at the position of the 10th house cusp, because that's the connection to the world at large. And in fact, particularly the ascendant is in a square with that. So the policy coming through quick, Mars on the ascendant, driven by emotion, not logic, is squaring off with the 10th house. So by rushing, we're not necessarily going to get a very good outcome. We do have a very good link with Mars and Uranus links back to Saturn in a very constructive way. So if you're working personally on something where you are listening to your instincts, Mars and Saturn in the water signs of Cancer and Pisces, but you're prepared to go for it in a fresh and innovative way, then for sure there are some possibilities. But for me, it's Mars continuing to clash with Chiron. So Chiron is the comet that's very much to do with where we can shine up personally. It's where our superpower is, but it's also where we can feel most vulnerable and not very at ease. So Mars is obviously the ruler of the sign of Aries, so it is a reciprocal link, but not a very pleasant one. So the intolerance of Mars is kind of really being a bit bullying in the sign of Cancer. And although Mars in Leo can be very proud and somewhat arrogant at times, depends on what house it's in, I feel it will be better once Mars goes into the sign of Leo on the 18th of April. So the other thing to take out from this chart is that Pluto is in the sector of open enemies, but it is forging that very constructive link with the midheaven, but also Neptune. So we are going to see people expressing their emotions, their passions. We're going to see much more conversation about people's desire not to be bullied and in some ways forced into situations which is based on a political agenda that doesn't necessarily even make much financial logic. If it was all approached in a very cautious step-by-step way, yes indeed, you can see some of the reasons for the unhappiness. Now, as I mentioned before, Venus goes direct on the 13th, but on the 14th we have that mighty Saturn conjunction with the North Node. But to be honest, it's in play for the whole of week 2 and the start of week 3. And that really can see some karma come to pass. And it's going to be very interesting how this all plays out. I think what's true to say is even economists don't quite know where this will end, but we've already seen one announcement of we've made an agreement with Vietnam. Well, you're not going to get people to reinvest in America's automotive production if they just think it's something that is going to change very quickly. So by admitting that, you're already revealing that you're actually just trying to leverage people for short-term gain, and it's not actually a long-term joined up plan, and therefore it loses credibility. But by the 25th, when they come into a conjunction, well, Saturn and Venus are still with the node, but they're in the second house of everyday money. But look at the position of the ascendant. It is in the business sign of Capricorn. We do have Pluto still, of course, in Aquarius, and it is still forging a very positive link with that node. They don't actually come into an exact sextile this month, but what we can also see when that second event occurs is that Mars is in an opposition with Pluto. And as I predicted, the last third of this month could be very stormy because those two are going to be T-squaring initially the Sun's entrance into Taurus on the 19th, but also they get involved a bit more broadly in the Taurus new moon of the 27th. Guess what? Taurus is the sign of money. So what we get with Mars opposite Pluto is a lot of posturing, a lot of people being hard. Well, you make your step and we're going to make our step. And it started to come into play, if you recall, when Mars moved into the sign of Leo in the early part of November, and so we had tension started to amp up then. But that's quite a potentially warlike posture, and you can see there's the Sun at 5 degrees in a T-square with both Pluto and also the position of Mars. So we're still going to have a lot of highly charged energy at that time. What we will have on the 26th, however, is that Mercury leaves its shadow and moves into free air, if you like, and Venus returns to the sign of Aries on the 1st of May. But it won't be until the 5th of May that Venus ends its post-retrograde shadow. So overwhelmingly, this is one of the most challenging months I can ever remember. The way I approach my astrology is not to tell you all the time it's going to be amazing. We can keep telling people it's going to be amazing because it might in some way give them some short-term up, but what's better is to be accurate, because if I'm accurate, it helps you to think about, well, could I squeeze a little bit more from my budget? Could I be a bit thriftier? Could I engage in some recycling? Could I buy some things that are pre-owned? Could be really groovy, finding that lovely jacket in a charity shop that's absolutely in mint condition and you're getting it at a fraction of its original retail price. Is there a way that I can sell off items I no longer need and create some extra income? Is there a way that I can use my flair and artistry, very Piscean, and particularly as Mars is, particularly as Venus in Taurus, very much to do with making, can I make or create something which brings me some extra value? But also, if you encounter someone who tries to bully you on your contract, your deal, what they're offering you or what they won't offer you, and tries to leverage it, from the knowledge of this video, I hope that will give you the tools to stand your ground or to deal with the politics of your situation in a much more astute way. Thank you so much for joining me. Remember, if you'd like to have a one-to-one with me, please check out my testimonials below. It's a massive part of what I do. If you'd like to have an astrology video reading, proving incredibly popular, please see the link below for those. Or if you'd like to get that free natal horoscope downloaded to your device straight away, please see the link below for that too. So Aries, for you, the Venus-Saturn conjunction is in house 12. That could see something come to a close. It doesn't have to be in a bad way. Maybe something will naturally come to a conclusion. It could be an interest, because Venus can be about flair, creativity. Maybe in some way you express yourself. It's just run its course. It may, of course, be a relationship that you're reviewing. It doesn't, again, have to come to an end. It may be that you just need a little bit of space to think about things, to just really mull over and consider your options. That could be around a friendship, a business partnership, as much as a romantic tie. But also you could be thinking about a past relationship and how much that affected you. Now that could be a more challenging influence. So if someone wasn't very pleasant or kind or had quite a shattering effect on you, perhaps a relationship when it came to a close, the energy of that tie could come up in quite an evocative way over the next few weeks. But equally, you could meet someone, but that person you meet could be perhaps a little reserved, or you may want to keep it between yourselves. There may even be a need for confidentiality at this stage. Maybe it's something that you're planning in terms of your finances behind the scenes. So it's all to do with what's not necessarily in the here and now. And if you're in the mode to work through that, it can be a very valuable time. The 12th house is about reflection, but to be honest, it can be about ending. So if there is someone that you're not quite so sure of their sincerity, it may be a colleague, it could be someone in your friendship group, just be conscious of not being too open about anything that's very sensitive at this time. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. So Taurus, for you, April can be very powerful because Venus, your ruler, your sole domiciliary ruler, your guide, in that connection with Saturn, could see Saturn asking some serious questions about your future hopes, about your aspirations, about where you'd like to be lucky, about your connections to others, your friendship circle, your group interactions. All of those come under a more critical gaze. However, if you have got certain associations which are very steady and enduring, you can actually appreciate them all the more. But if there are people that are going to be revealed as fair weather friends, particularly with Venus in retrograde through to the 13th, that may be somewhat disappointing for you, particularly as the full moon on the 13th, as Venus goes direct, could tease into the open those people who are perhaps not as transparent as you would like. But equally, if you're attracted to someone that's in your social circle and you're a little bit concerned about how this may go, I think the best way ahead is to go one step at a time. So a little bit more of a cautious approach would be a good thing. But if you're wanting to break free from someone, it may be right at the start of May that you make that final binding move. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. Gemini, the energy in the sign of Aries over the last couple of years, the node, the eclipses, and also Chiron have been emphasizing your connections to others. When Venus moved into Aries, it was a wonderful opportunity to draw closer to people that you felt you could comfortably collaborate and cooperate with. But as Venus reverses back into the sign of Pisces, but now meets Saturn, some of those associations could be tested. If you are going to be doing any presentations or interviews through the month of April, it is going to be vitally important that you're perceived in a very workmanlike way. Whereas Venus can be about charm, can be about cultivation, you need to back that up with the hard facts and figures that will win over a potentially doubtful audience. If you work in a big organisation, for example, as much as those relationships might be nice, they may not be seen as absolutely vital. So if you're in a situation at the moment where your relationships are not running so honky-dory, that could push you to research other opportunities. It will be at the start of May that you start to feel a greater sense of direction about how this can play out. But for now, whatever relationships you have in the professional sphere, those are the ones that need working at the most diligently. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. Cancer, for you, Venus in your 9th house without the presence of Saturn would be absolutely delightful. She can be a truth seeker in the 9th house, but she can also love immersing herself, particularly in water, of course, but in any kind of cultural situation, which is very enriching to our senses. Then comes along the harsh, cold stare of Saturn. So if there is an essential truth that you may be avoiding, perhaps in a relationship, a personal one, a business alliance, a friendship, you could be forced in a way by Saturn to confront that truth, even if it is an inconvenient one. And that process can go on right to the end of this month. If there is someone that you're attracted to, but you don't necessarily feel that you're getting answers that resonate in a truly meaningful or genuine way, that can also be shown up too. If you have got overseas investments, those could be challenged. If you are traveling anywhere, it's vitally important that you double check every single part of what you need to comply to be safely at ease on the journey, but also when you're in that country too. The 9th house, very much about the international dimension. The other thing to mention is if you feel just penned in, you don't really feel very comfortable, perhaps in a business situation, perhaps there's too many rules and regulations, perhaps it's a bit too rigid for you. If you're someone who's more used to doing your own thing, complying to someone else's credo could be something that really starts to make you cringe, but also pushes you to think about your options over the next few weeks. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. So Leo, this combination between Venus and Saturn comes hot on the heels of the Sun's recent move into your sister fire sign of Aries and the solar eclipse, which were very much to do with injecting your situation with passion, enthusiasm and potentially adventure. What's not to like? Well, it's all about the economy, stupid, because of course Venus can be about money. The 8th house for you, very much about things like pensions, stocks and shares, investments and savings. So if that's an area that's showing up as being a challenge for you, particularly if you're sharing them with someone else and you both have a different view, perhaps it's around a business, how to market it, how to expand it, that could be something that you do need to work through. Now, of course, Venus can be about intimacy, particularly in the 8th house. If you're in a relationship and you can't remember the last time it got hot and spicy, this month could really set you thinking about what you truly want. Is it enough just being companionable? If you really want the hot stuff full on, when Venus returns to Aries at the very start of May, but most of all emerges from its post-retrograde shadow on the 5th, that could see some Leos deciding to head out and be much more independent and check out their options. But seriously, the 8th house is where we're most invested. That can be spiritually, it can be intimately, it can be around finance. If you're putting a lot in and it doesn't feel matched, Saturn's going to make you feel much more conscious of that fact and push you to be decisive in your decision making. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. Virgo, for you, Venus and Saturn are in your 7th house. The 7th house can be wonderful for relating. It's where Venus really chimes its more Libran energy. It's about harmony. So if we put Saturn there, we can create a cooler, perhaps even more resistant environment. Even if you've been getting on well with someone, whether it's a colleague, a friend, there could be a few pinch points over the next month. Will it be terminal? Not necessarily. If, however, you really are wanting some kind of equilibrium in the way you interact with someone and you don't feel heard, seen or respected, Saturn could push and provoke you to actually close off, to seal off their option of connecting with you. Now that's going to happen if you feel there's a real sense of injustice, but it might not necessarily be limited to a friendship. Sometimes in life we can get hurt when we try our best to forge a connection and another person may not actually be as available as us. So it can be to do with expectations, of course, but when it gets into the love realm, that's when things can get very, very complex. Things can be off, they can be hot, they can be cold. If you've really been trying your very hardest, someone could truly appreciate over this next month just how sincere you are. And actually that could seal the deal. But unfortunately, the converse can be true as well. So it is a little bit polarized, I feel, between all in or all out. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. Libra, Venus, your ruler, can be very much about charm, diplomacy, svelte interactions, but in the 6th house, that can be about those more practical dimensions that do require precision. And Saturn can demand it, and in fact has been demanding it over the last couple of years. If you're someone who has been doing your absolute best, being obliging, being conscientious, especially in terms of your work, but you never seem to get anything but more criticism, I feel that this month it really can start to pale, and you may find yourself wanting to just break out. Even if it's not to leave a job, it may be to have some time off. In a personal relationship, I feel that consideration and thoughtfulness, particularly around those kind of gestures like making someone a nice lunch or a cup of tea without them asking, writing a nice text, those things can be really appreciated. But equally, if you feel you don't ever get that kind of acknowledgement, that can also rankle too. So I feel that this month for you is much more about how the last couple of years has been, particularly with Saturn asking some tough questions. You've been pouring in the effort at work. If you don't feel appreciated, I feel some Librans may be looking at the jobs vacancy columns or online. If you do feel appreciated, do feel acknowledged, it It could be an opportunity to gain some kind of improvement in your service package. But in a romantic relationship, sometimes it's not just about the physical attraction, the more magical, magnetic side of relating. It is about doing our bit, particularly in the domestic sphere, and that's going to show up over the next 4 weeks for you. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. Scorpio, Venus in the sign of Pisces can be delicious for you. It's where you can demonstrate with aplomb your talents, your flair, artistry. It can be where you get romantic, enjoy the talents of your children, but it can also be where you socialize. What's not to like? It's just that Saturn in the 5th house is anything but a barrel of laughs. It can extinguish joy. It can be very scrutinizing. It can be really miserly. So if you're in a romantic situation that doesn't really have much romance about it, that's going to make you think over the next 4 weeks. It's definitely a time to be risk averse with your finances. Why? Because the 5th house can be about speculation. Venus can be about money. So if there's something you're drawn to because you think it's an opportunity, I think it's best to really think very carefully before making a final decision about that. But in a romantic context, if you're not enjoying someone's company that you've been hanging out with of late, whether it is a friend or someone in a more intimate way, Saturn could see you want to put the brakes on and spend a bit more time alone. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. Sagittarius, over the last couple of years, Saturn has been asking some pretty challenging questions around your family, home, emotional life, or perhaps about where you live. The combination with Saturn and Venus could see you affect some changes to your residency that have some upsides. The effort and application of Saturn mixed with the flair and artistry of Venus may see you redecorate. It may see you move your furniture around. It could see you upcycle an item. It could see you use your flair, but in a very productive way. What could be perhaps a little more challenging, maybe if a close relationship, could be someone within your clan, maybe your extended family. If things are a bit cool between you at the moment, that can just sadly seem that much more obvious. But Saturn is about hard work. Venus in the 4th house is about using our sensitivities in order to decipher what people need. So if you're up for working at your emotional relationships, you could still make progress despite the initial retrograde that Venus has. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. Capricorn, Saturn, your ruler applying to Venus, suggests that you need to say what you mean and mean what you say. Someone could find you perhaps a little direct, perhaps you're telling them how you feel in an unvarnished way, but at least they know you're being genuine. sometimes Venus can be a little bit synthetic, and that's what Saturn will push back upon. Maybe someone's going to tell you something that you tell them almost straight away just doesn't stack up. But if you are thinking about a new mode of transport, because the third house can be about how we move around, whether it is a car, whether it is a motorcycle or a bike, this could be something that you are thinking about very carefully. Now, Saturn, of course, can be where we encounter restrictions. So very important when it comes to paperwork, emails and text messages, that you read through them very carefully before responding over this next 4 weeks. If you do have quite an active role in your community, if you have a connection to your neighbours or siblings, that's an area too that will need some care and hard work over the month of April. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. Aquarius, because Saturn's your co-ruler, you have quite the appreciation of what he represents. You know that some of the traditional approaches to life actually work really well. But also you have that rare ability to be very progressive at the same time. So Saturn over the last couple of years may have seen you working very hard to get the foundations of your world really solid, but that may have seen you being a little bit thriftier, perhaps economizing, being cannier in the way you handle your resources. But equally, it could have seen an old income stream dry up in some way, not perform in quite the way it has in the past. If you put the hard work in, the application, then you could start to see this month things rebuilding. Venus can assist this. It's where you may want to be overly extravagant or even generous that things could go wrong, or splash out on things that aren't really essential. So you are being asked to be very earthy, very practical about your resources. If you are discussing a contract, it won't necessarily follow that you'll get everything you've asked for. There may be a tussle, there may need to be a negotiation. And this is where the charm of Venus comes in, because being patient, hearing the other side out and being tactical could work much better than actually getting very frustrated if it's not giving you the result at quite the pace you would like. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more. Pisces, Saturn over the last couple of years has asked some searching questions. At times your vitality may have felt low, your enthusiasm somewhat blunted. You may have in some ways encountered some opposition. Maybe you haven't felt quite that you've had the spark that you've possessed in the past. What Saturn has really been doing is asking you to simplify things, to narrow your focus onto the range of interests you have or pursuits that are actually essential for you. Now, Venus is exalted in your sign and is great if you do want to remodel your personal appearance. But Saturn could be that inner voice which kind of doubts us, perhaps lowers our confidence, could be quite self-critical. You must resist this. Also be aware that if you pick up any faint praise from someone, it doesn't necessarily mean they're against you or they're being harsh. It just means they're not quite as invested as you would like, because the first house is about our identity. But of all the qualities you possess, one of the greatest, I think, is artistry. Whether it is through being a maker or a creator, whether it's through music, photography, film, whether it is through painting, those are the areas you can often thrive. And the combination of Venus and Saturn just says to you, if you've got something on the go at the moment that you are truly inspired by, try to summon up every ounce of energy you can find to push towards the golden prize. You may not feel that you're getting the recognition, the rewards or acknowledgement you deserve, or even the money, but once Venus switches back into Aries at the start of May, but most of all comes out of shadow on the 5th, if you really apply yourself, that can be when you get that outcome. Please check out my new website at www.patrickarundell.com. You can download your amazing free natal horoscope. I honestly think it's the best there is. Or you can sign up for your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning. With that now comes an overall appraisal of the key planetary influence for each day, as well as your zodiac forecast. Please see below for more.